I received a complimentary review copy of Viticulture Essential Edition from the publisher, so thanks to Stonemaier Games. I'm often torn when trying to identify the hook of a game. Is it the theme, the narrative, the setting that draws players in? Or is it the mechanisms at play, the design choices, the unique engine which drives the game? With Viticulture, I could make a really strong case for either of those things, but there's a third hook, and that's the game maker themselves. More than any other publisher, Stonemaier Games has nurtured a community since its earliest products. And published in 2012, Viticulture is their earliest product. A little bit of Stonemaier history. For a great many Stonemaier fans, that's a hook in and of itself. At the time of filming, Viticulture sits at number 25 on the Board Game Geek Top 100. It's a game with some clout. If you haven't played it, you've probably heard of it. An early Kickstarter success story, co-designed by a then nascent inventor Jamie Stonemaier, honed with expansions, community input and revised editions. This is a game with a lot of heart. History, word of mouth, famous designer, critical acclaim. It might not be the only hook, but make no mistake, it is a hook. I'm Adam Porter. I design games and I run this YouTube channel where I primarily focus on game design and the board game industry. In this series of reviews, I'm analysing games as products, and Viticulture is a fascinating one because it's 10 years old. It's already proven itself as a strong commercial product, and I'm compelled to unpick why. In Viticulture, you play as the owner of a growing vineyard in Tuscany. Each round of the game represents a year with 4 seasons which work a little bit differently. In spring, you select your place in the turn order, with players later in the sequence gaining immediate rewards, victory points, money or cards representing vines, wine orders, or visitors with special abilities. In summer, you place workers onto various action spaces, allowing you to draw or play cards from your hand, plant vines in your fields, and build structures to increase the efficiency of your yard. Once an action space has been selected, it's blocked so it can't be used by other players. But each player has a single grande worker who can break this rule and visit any action location even if occupied. You're probably not going to want to use all your workers in summer though, because you're going to need to hold on to some of them for the winter actions. In autumn, you simply draw a visitor card, but winter is a repeat of the summer process, only using different action spaces. In winter, you can harvest your fields, you can add red and white grapes to your crush pad, train additional workers, convert grapes into wine, and fulfill wine orders on your cards. When one player passes 20 points on the tracker, that indicates that this will be the final round of the game, and when the year's been completed, the highest scorer wins. Every product makes a promise. Expectations are raised by the art style, the name, the box size, the publisher, designer, duration, and age range. And as a game maker, you need to deliver on these promises. The shift in cover art from the first edition to this essential edition of Viticulture illustrates a key point about aesthetics that I've frequently made in my videos. This is Viticulture First Edition, the strategic game of winemaking. The title and subline spells out what we're going to be doing in the game, and it's supported by a painting of an idyllic Italian landscape. It's a fine start. An effective box cover tells you what the game involves, but the Essential Edition goes one step further. The addition of 2 attractive smiling figures in the forefront, carefree as they lift grapes from a container, gives us a little hint of who we represent, and most importantly, how we're going to feel. Viticulture is an inviting, relaxing game to play. Much of the game takes place on your own personal board, cultivated only by you and your own family of workers, untouched by other players. The COVID world is tough, but pre-modern rustic Tuscany is pretty zen. I think this points to the second hook of the game. The setting and narrative of Viticulture has broad appeal. We all want to live in Italy, we all drink wine, and we all want to be as content as that attractive pair on the cover. Big generalisations, of course. I mean, I don't drink wine, it makes me really ill. But I still buy it, I gift it to friends and family, I offer it to guests, and I aspire to a sophisticated lifestyle with good food, stimulating conversation, and fine wine flowing. In an industry full of popular titles with horrific backdrops, grotesque monsters and war and global pandemics, Viticulture offers up a much more appealing theme: aspiration. 7 years before the mega success of Wingspan, designer-publisher Stonemaier had his finger on the pulse of Eurogame players. The most significant market for tableau building and worker placement games is not action-oriented teenagers or party-oriented young adults. The market is largely made up of 30 or 40-somethings looking for a quiet, thoughtful puzzle to play with their family and friends. Birdwatching and winemaking might not be the most exciting themes, but they're just so very wholesome. All that aside, the product wouldn't have succeeded if it didn't have something special going on with its gameplay. The core mechanical hook in any worker placement game is usually pretty tough to pin down. Try to condense what's unique about Architects of the West Kingdom into a short, pithy phrase. It's not so easy, even though the game's pretty unique. And likewise, superficially, Viticulture is formulaic and familiar, but there are enough little twists to make it stand out among the crowd. The grande worker who can break the rules to visit an occupied location, the rewards for playing late in turn order, the wide variety of guests visiting the vineyards with their disparate abilities, the changing seasons with limitations on which actions are available at any given time. All of this gives Viticulture a unique identity. It doesn't have one groundbreaking new mechanism, but a number of small twists add up to a distinctive flavour. My reviews are becoming less structured. I'm starting to break free of my product design analytics, but I'm not ready to give up on all of that just yet. So let's plug Viticulture into my ladder formula. Each game is awarded 0 to 3 points in 5 different categories, pushing the game further and further up a ladder, representing engagement. A perfect score is irrelevant. Anything over 10 will reach the top of the ladder and indicate a real classic. Starting with thematic immersion, well, Viticulture does well here. I know exactly who I am and what I'm doing. Of course, there is abstraction as in any Euro game, but the theme and mechanisms go hand in hand. So it scores a 3. For interaction though, it's a 1. Viticulture features accidental blocking. When you utilise a location, it ceases to be available for other players, but even that is eased by the presence of the rule-breaking grande worker. The game is largely played solitaire on your own little player board, and I'm fine with that. For stress and challenge, Viticulture gets a 2. There's a lot to do, and there's not enough actions to get it all done. The setting is placid, but the game plays a little bit more intense. It's an enjoyable struggle, but even on your less productive turns, you're probably getting plenty done. And you're not going to be punished for not getting things done that you've set out to do. A really engaging game often features frequent and generous feedback, rewards, bonuses and power-ups to motivate you and lift your spirits as you play. Feedback is steady in Viticulture. Wine orders, bonus actions and other transactions award victory points throughout the game, and points are recorded on the track at the base of the board. And that's my least favourite feature of the game. I don't enjoy race mechanisms like this in strategic games. I'll discuss this a little bit more when we look at my customer journey map. So Viticulture gets 2 points. Worker placement games are generally fairly cerebral affairs. The strongest strategic player is usually going to do pretty well. But Viticulture is more tactical than most in the genre. It's often a case of playing turn by turn, making the most of what's on offer in terms of your visitor cards and the spaces available on the board unblocked, rather than pursuing long-term strategies. The visitor card powers can be really useful, or they can be pretty useless, depending on the game state at the time, so there's a significant chance element in the game. A degree of luck of the draw, which is uncharacteristic of the worker placement genre. It's not a criticism, it's more a feature of the game. But I am going to score the game down a little bit for meaningful choices. It's still a complex strategy game though, so I don't want to hammer this point too hard. Viticulture scores a 2. So the overall score is 10. Viticulture pushes over the threshold and sits atop the engagement ladder. Another explanation as to how it's connected with so many fans and why 10 years after publication it's still held in such high regard. Quickly reviewing my customer journey map, we can start to plot pain points in the product, areas where my mood drops significantly. So the onboarding process is a bit of a hurdle. There are a lot of rules to learn, especially surrounding the value of grapes and wine, the storage and mixing to create blush and sparkling varieties. Now I was taught the game several years ago, and I found I only truly understood all the various interactions after completion of that first game. Revisiting the game after a very long break, I turned to the rulebook and I found it pretty dense. It's not badly written, it's not badly laid out, but the game is simply pretty complex. I mean, I should say it is comparable to other similar games in the genre, and worker placement games do tend to be this way. As I frequently do though, I turned to Rodney Smith's Watch It Played YouTube tutorial to learn the rules. But even that was compromised by the fact that the tutorial relates to a second edition, while I'm playing the Essential Edition. On the positive side though, setup and teardown are assisted by the inclusion of some excellent storage trays. The game could potentially be really fiddly with all those little pieces, so this is a massive help. Losing the game? That's a bit of a low. As in most games, I suppose, but here I feel the loss is harder because of the abrupt end to the game. In Viticulture, the first player to 20 points ends the game, and after completion of that round, the highest scorer wins. There's no reward for second or third place. There's no opportunity to sit and calculate your score at the end, to ponder over where you did well and how your opponents ran away with it. That delicious, tense anticipation of the reveal is absent in Viticulture. If you're behind, you know you're behind. Everyone else knows you're behind. It's there for everyone to see. It's not always easy to stay motivated when you know full well that you're out of the running. Is the game innovative? Well, it's iterative in all the right ways. Viticulture builds on what's gone before and adds in some micro innovations in the gameplay mechanisms, particularly in this revised Essential Edition. Much of the innovation on display here, though, is in the marketing, but we're going to come back to that. Does it answer a need? Yeah. In 2012, and to this day, the market is absolutely swamped with high fantasy, combative and action-packed settings. Viticulture was a breath of fresh air with its idyllic vistas and constructive rather than destructive narrative. There's a sizable market for this stuff, and that market isn't yet sated. There's a reason the industry is churning out nature-themed games in 2022. Wingspan demonstrated how big that demand is, and inventors and publishers were quick to follow. Viticulture was an earlier example, tapping into an underserved community of gamers and giving them what they wanted. Could the product grow with its user? Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty to explore in this box. A large variety of cards will give a different feel to each game, but more importantly, there are several distinct but balanced strategies to explore, even if the cards are identical from game to game. The included Automa Factory solo rules, and expansion decks and modules that you can purchase to add to your package, and there's a strong support from the community of fans as well as Stonemaier himself, and this all makes it a real dynamic, living product. Branding. Are there opportunities to develop this brand? I think so. Viticulture is a known entity in the board game world. If you're a tabletop gamer and you haven't played Viticulture, well, you've probably heard of it. And if you haven't heard of it, you've probably heard of Stonemaier Games. And if you haven't heard of them, well, maybe you've heard of Jamie Stonemaier. Viticulture is a brand within a brand. Should Jamie wish to, and I have no reason to think that he does, Jamie could certainly explore standalone sequels, dice games, card games and roll and writes carrying the Viticulture moniker and logo, and they would sell. So all that remains is to plot Viticulture Essential Edition onto my idea execution matrix. The best-selling products invariably marry a fantastic idea with outstanding execution, pushing up into the red and orange parts of the chart. Viticulture was a very strong idea 10 years ago, and it would still be a strong idea if it was released today. It's a little bit derivative in its gameplay, and there are no groundbreaking mechanisms here, so I'm holding it off from the top spot, but it's still very impressive. The execution of the product has been fascinating to observe. Viticulture was a big success in the early days of Kickstarter. Stonemaier made some mistakes and missteps, which necessitated a second edition and then this Essential Edition, which incorporates some elements of the original Tuscany expansion. It's all very confusing. But they also pioneered several key components of the Kickstarter model, which are still ubiquitous today. International fulfillment centres, backer involvement and brand advocates. Jamie Stonemaier's cultivation of a community and his constant focus on the Stonemaier brand have inspired many self-publishers that followed. Viticulture was the start of all that. But setting aside these intangible aspects of execution and focusing purely on the physical product and ease of use, Viticulture is still a big success. It looks great, it's accessible, and it's engaging. It takes its place one step from the top right-hand corner of the grid. And of course, the absolute top right-hand corner is occupied by Stonemeier's later game, Wingspan, the million seller where Stonemaier pulled together all the lessons he learned from Viticulture and really took flight. If you enjoyed this review, please let me know in the comments, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. All the best.